So welcome everyone. My name is Megan Heuer. I am a social science research librarian, and I'm also the director of educational initiatives for SMU libraries. And I'm so happy to be talking about with you about this topic today. Doing literature reviews is a thing that I have had to learn a lot about, and I form workshops like this based on the things that I wish people had told me a long time ago. So to get us started, I want to hear from you. Do you have a lit review project that's coming up for you? If so, what discipline or topic are you looking at? And feel free to unmute yourself and talk or put something in the chat. And while you're doing that, I will say the project that I am working on right now is around reading and search effectiveness. So you'll see some of the examples I put in here are actually my own research project, because it was easier to share that as an example than to come up with a new one. Allison says math education. Excellent. Higher education. So we have a lot of Simmons people here today. Theology and justice. My own research is well, information studies are really interdisciplinary, but my project intersects with education research. Environmental engineering. Natural gas leaks. Very important. I will try to acknowledge any differences between disciplines. Of course, some of the expectations of how you would do a thing, there are differences across disciplines. I try for this to be as generic as I can make it. So, okay. So what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about how to plan for the research, and we're getting into some specific search strategies. I'm going to get into systems and tools for synthesizing a result. So I like to make what I'm doing really super practical for you all. So first, we're going to talk about the fact that there are different kinds of literature reviews. And depending on what you're doing really affects the scope of the thing and how you carry it out. So you may be doing an exploratory literature review. And this is the thing perhaps that we're most familiar with. You might have had a course in the past where the professor said, you know, you're going to do a literature review of such and such topic. We're just getting in and exploring what is out there on this topic. This may be kind of the first step in just getting to know an area of research. The scope of this tends to be a bit smaller. Then you may be doing a literature review for the purpose of designing and executing an original study, or it might be for a dissertation. And so as we move to this kind of literature review, the purpose of it shifts. The purpose of this kind of literature review is to show that what you are doing is original. And it's to demonstrate the research that led you up to the study that you're conducting. And so that will change the kind of things that you're choosing to put into your literature review, and it will change how you write it. And then finally, we have review as scholarship. So there are entire scholarly articles that the whole point of the thing is to review the literature. There's a review article, maybe they're just going back and talking about this is the state of the research. The scope of these tend to be quite big and quite broad. It could be a systematic review in which we're taking all the stuff out there and having this very rigorous way of accounting for all the things that are in the research. So the scope of these is really much, much broader than what you would do for an original study. So it's helpful to think about what is my purpose here and recognize that when you see things out there talking about how to do a literature review and what's expected, that you have to make sure that matches with what your project is. So here is a big question for us to start with. How is researching for a lit review different than for a research paper? And by research paper, I mean the kind of thing that we were used to doing for a college course, for an undergraduate course, or how is this thing about a literature review different? So And you can unmute yourself or put any thoughts you have about this in the chat. And it's okay also to say, not sure. I don't know. That's why I'm here. Okay, well, I'll talk about it. It seems like we're not sure about this. It's okay. So a literature review, we are having to account for not just some of the things, but all of the things. So if we're used to doing research for a research paper, we go and you do searches and you throw some words in the search box and you find relevant stuff and then you take it and use it. You're like, great, I found lots of things that help support maybe the argument that I'm making, or I found lots of things that mean that I can write a decent research paper. When you're doing a literature review, you're having to state that this is all of the things that matter. If I'm doing an original study and I have a literature review, I have to make sure I've accounted for everything that is out there. And so that means the kind of research you're going to be doing is much more intensive for this. Intensive, and it needs to be systematic. So in other words, I want to make sure I don't have some good stuff. I have to make sure I have all the good stuff, all of the relevant stuff. And so I'm going to be talking to, and I'll kind of point back to this idea as we talk about some of the search strategies. We need to make sure we're pulling everything in a systematic way, not just the things that happen to match the terms that you put in the search box. The other thing that may feel a little different is that, literature reviews are really supposed to be balanced. And so I'm just trying to account for everything's out there. If you're used to making arguments in your research papers, is a very objective kind of way of writing. For a research study, I suppose the argument that you're making is the fact that what you're doing is important and original. See, this is how it's been understood in the past. But we're really kind of taking a step back and writing about it in a more objective way, and we're having to research in a very balanced way. So we want to make sure we're accounting for the different possible ways that your topic has been approached. Okay, so here you go. This is our entire workshop today. We're going to go through these 6 steps. So these are the steps for conducting literature review. And of course, every time I put out a step-by-step, let's just recognize that research is messy. This whole thing is super messy. And so you may not end up following these 6 steps exactly, and that's okay. So we're going to start with the first couple steps of, first of all, you need to define what is the purpose of your literature review and what is it for? Who is the audience of this literature review? Where might this be published? And that definitely affects how you might think about it. And then next, you're going to think about what we'll call the requirements of inclusion. What kind of things am I going to expect that I'm going to have to include in my literature review? So this is really just a little bit of a planning phase. And this helps set you up that when you go out there and actually start searching, that means that you'll already have some parameters that you can use to limit things. So I'll go through a couple of these with my example. What is the literature reviewer? Who's the audience? What is the scope? So let's say my project is I am doing a literature review for an original study. Where might I publish this? Who is my expected audience? What does that audience know about? What do they not know about? So, and I'll give an example. I've done a couple of studies now in which it was very interdisciplinary, in which we're taking stuff from a couple different disciplines and bringing it together. Depending on where I'm publishing it or who I'm talking to, that's going to shift how much I'm going to lean on the stuff for that audience. So for example, if I have an audience of librarians and I have an audience of education researchers, The things that I'm pulling out of education research may be less familiar to librarians. So if I'm publishing in a librarian journal, I'm going to lean heavier on the things that help delineate the education research. I might go into more in depth with that. Versus if I'm publishing in a journal for education researchers, I might have to lean more on the things from the librarian side, from the information literacy side. So that's kind of what I mean by that, of really thinking ahead of what am I going to be producing at the end. Then so for number 2, what kinds of literature would you include? Is there a date of publication? Do I not go back farther than such and such date? What's important for my discipline? Does it matter where the study took place? Does the location matter? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Really depends on the project. What kinds of literature is expected in this discipline? Is it really expected that everything in my literature review would be a peer-reviewed article? Or there are some disciplines in which you might include other kinds of gray literature or government publications, et cetera. So these things really just depend. And if you're not sure, that's a great conversation to have with your professor or with your advisor. So we'll stop for a minute and let you think about your own projects. And if you feel like sharing, you can do so in the chat. What is the scope of your project? Are there any requirements that you already know about already? Do you already know, yes, in this field, I've got to only have peer-reviewed articles, for example? Okay, so we're going to start getting into the meat of the thing. Oh, we have a couple of things. So Marissa says range of peer, government, and journals. Allison, I'm not sure. And now, I'm not sure. That's yet again, great questions to have with faculty around that. Or your library, sometimes librarian will have ideas as well, but really talk to your professors. Yeah, sometimes in the education fields, depending on the topic, there can be also government sources that are really important. And that's an important thing to think about too. Like their scholarship is authoritative, but there's all kinds of other authoritative information out there that's not scholarship. Okay, so we're going to get into the meat of the thing. So we're going to look at steps 3 and 4. We're going to start by exploring an area of research and mapping the topic with the hopes that by the end of that, you're going to determine a focused review question. And that is different than a research question. I'm going to talk about what those differences are. So this is such an important idea for this kind of research and for research in general, that you're going to start with exploratory research. So why start with exploratory research? Why not just find citations for the lit review? And what's funny is I know this. I know that I should start by exploring and then go to finding citations. And I'm still so tempted to go in and I just start researching and I grab things and I grab those citations and I store them away. And then by the time I get to the end of my research project, I'm like, what was I thinking? I just pulled a bunch of things that became useless for me later. So why start with exploratory research? A lot of times you're starting from the point you don't know what's out there yet. You don't know the shape of this topic. You don't necessarily know how much research has been done and what kind of areas and pockets and subtopics and all the things that are out there. You may have a sense of the direction of what you want to do, and not really a more specific thing. And this a lot of times is kind of anxiety producing for all of us. And the important thing to say at this point is it's okay. It's okay that I don't know this yet. And also, let's just think ahead that you're going to run into, there's going to be a lot. There's going to be a wide range of things that are out there, and it's potentially going to feel overwhelming. That's also okay. So our job with the exploratory phase is just to find out what's out there. What is the shape of this thing. And so, and then from there, once I get to a point of narrowing down to a review question, I will come from a place of knowing instead of just not knowing and worrying about it. So what is the shape of the thing? And then I will be able to scope from there. So my big trick for exploratory searching. So exploratory searching is the 30,000 foot view. What all is happening in this area of research? I'm going to define my major areas of research. What I'm showing you here is a couple different concept maps. And the one on the right is actually a real live concept map I used for my research study. And this is where I started out, was that whiteboard. And so a concept map is just a visual representation of the different areas of research that are out there. And so as you're going through and exploring, just kind of write it down. Like, these are the things that are out there. Eventually, you will be able to narrow down and pick a branch of this, or pick a couple branches, or a subtopic of the thing. If you look at mine here, critical reading in higher education, I mean, the branch I ended up with, I don't even know it's on there. It's off this intersections with research. Modes of reading when researching. I ended up more with this by the end, and look how big it started. Like, I wasn't sure, and this was my way of exploring that topic. I personally find that this is kind of very relieving of the anxiety and information overload that comes when you first start a research project. So I do have pro tools for doing this. If you like to use digital interfaces to do this, Jamboard, MindMeister, and Box Canvas. And this Box Canvas is brand new. I just saw this last week. If you all use Box through SMU, which is just that tool for storing your documents, you can, start a new Word document, start a new spreadsheet. You can start a new canvas, and there's a template in there that is a concept map that you can use. So if you like to kind of do these things digitally and not scrawling on a whiteboard, then these are fun things. This is especially helpful if you're doing a research project with another person or with a team, then you can share these digitally and kind of all contribute to it. Okay, so if I'm doing exploratory searching, what do I do? What am I actually doing? So you want to skim at this point. Read abstracts, not articles. Give yourself permission that you do not need to read these articles right now. It's just going to lead to crazy making and overwhelm if you try to go in and read the whole thing. Add to your concept map. You're going to conduct subject searches in relevant disciplinary databases. And I'm going to talk about subject searching in a minute and I'm going to show you how to do it. But so I'll put a pin in that for now, and we'll come back and talk about that more. The other thing that you might do is find relevant scholarly reference works and reviews. So in other words, find scholarship that is summing up what's out there on a topic. And a lot of times these things will have citations to major authors. It is a way of quickly getting yourself up to speed on what is known on this topic, who are the seminal authors, and what's the state of the literature. If it's a current one, it will even point to, this is what we don't know. It may give you ideas about the direction that your original research might go, because they're saying, we don't know this yet, or this is the ways this hasn't been investigated yet. So when we're talking about scholarly reference works, we're talking about handbooks. Handbooks are basically in book form, a set of review articles. A review is, what's the state of the scholarship on this topic? It may be scholarly encyclopedias, annual reviews. Annual reviews are an entire journal of review articles. So for example, the annual review of economics, the annual review of political science, it will go back and take different topics and say, this is what we know. Here's a critique of how this has been studied and the synthesis of what's been studied. Bibliographies. We have all of the Oxford bibliographies. The Oxford bibliographies are great. They go through and take a topic. So here we have one on motivation. This is related to education. So it goes in everything. What do we understand about the topic of motivation in education? I'll go through different subtopics. It will point you to different important works. There's even a way to open it up and find a link through our library. Do we have this? And get through there. So a lot of times, so I will say scholarly reference works are very important for certain disciplines in the social sciences and the humanities. It is less so important for the sciences and engineering because those disciplines, currency is so important. There's really not time to then write a book about it. But I will say for the education fields and psychology, et cetera, this is so important. These are good things to look for. I found a handbook really early on in my research, and it really helped crack things open and make it so much easier to do the research. Look for links to these kind of things on your research guides. So your librarian will link to that on the subject guides, or talk to your subject librarian. Okay, so we're going to talk about subject searching, and I have screenshots here, but I'm going to go in and show you in a database live. And because we have a lot of education folks here, let's do it in education source. Okay. Oh no. Come on. It doesn't work. Try it again. All right. Okay. Subject. So first off, searching for scholarly articles through the library, a lot of times we may be familiar with using this big main search box. So this searches most of our databases all at once. But if you are really trying to narrow to a disciplinary lens, then going through a disciplinary database can be really helpful. Like I really only want to know what's going on in the education field. Then once you go into a disciplinary database, there's all kinds of filters and advanced searching that suddenly become possible, that will be really helpful for doing a literature review. So for example, in PsycInfo, it has a special filter by methodology. That may be something extremely helpful to you if you're looking for studies only within a certain methodology. So look for those kind of special filters. I even go down and see like, what is this? This one's pretty, has the standard kind of things. The other thing that's really helpful is subject searching. So subjects are terms that have been applied to a piece of information that are really about what that piece of information is about. It's not just terms that are mentioned in the article or in the record of the thing. It's actually what something is about. So that's very important. It kind of removes that problem of having to find every which possible way somebody talked about a thing. So they come from a restricted list of words that's in, you would in the database look for something that's called thesaurus or subject or index. It could be a subject index. So let's say, let's try this distance education. I like to say relevancy ranked. I want to see other things that are sort of relevant to that term. And now I have a list of terms. So if I look in here, distance education, they're sometimes going to define it for you, which is important. Even if I feel like I know what distance education means, let's really know what they're talking about. Takes place when the educators and students are not physically present in the same location, etc. Then it has these other narrower terms, related terms. Some of these other things may be helpful to you in your search. I'm going to click to say yes, I want distance education. So now I'm still finding 26,840 things, which is a lot. But if I search this only as a keyword, it'd be a lot more than that even. So from here, one of the things we talked about before was The idea of systematic. Using a subject search to help fuel your research is really one of those important ways of making sure what you're doing, that you're pulling things systematically, that I am using this whole system to pull everything in. And chances are distance education, that's very, very broad. Let's say I want it distance education for university students or higher education, I'm not sure, or college students. I can even do this. I put it in as a keyword, but then I can see higher education is a subject term. So I can even do that and make it a subject term. Not everything lends itself to being a subject term, so you may need to add in other keywords from there. The subjects just help it be kind of more systematic in how you're pulling everything. And so remember, at this stage, what you're doing, if I going back, you're skimming across things. So your job right now is only to skim across. If that's as much as you know, or maybe you know more than that about what your topic or direction might be, but if that's as much as what you know, you're just skimming through titles and noting down on your concept map. These are areas of research that people are doing. I'm just filling out my map. I'm just trying to understand what's out there. Okay, so I'll stop and take a pause right now. Does anybody have any questions? I just went through a lot of things. I will point out, if you would like to revisit how to do subject searching, we do have a research guide, and I'm going to put this in the chat too, this link. So this is a guide that goes through a lot of the things we're talking about today, but there are a couple videos down here using subject searching in databases. And then I'm also going to talk about this forward and backward searching. And so we have some short videos to help serve as a reminder for you about how to do those things. Okay, so.
I have a quick question.
Sure, yeah.
So I'm curious about, I know you mentioned earlier, like some of us are doing interdisciplinary work. I've had some challenges, like I guess finding work at the intersection that I'm particularly interested in. So would you recommend just maybe trying some databases in other disciplines, or would you recommend just going broad across databases? I've just been I've been researching something that I thought there would be more on, and I've been coming up with results that don't quite hit what I'm looking for.
Sure. Yeah, I can speak that. And I hear you, because I some of the stuff I'm doing is interdisciplinary, and it's hard. It feels, the hard part is then you're reaching into another discipline that is not your own, and sort of the learning curve is so steep. So I'll say a couple things. Yes, go into what you think might be a related discipline and search in their database. You can go into library search. I mean, when you're in the exploration phase, you're just exploring, you're trying to see what's out there, or what people are calling things. And that's the challenge of even interdisciplinary. What is this thing called even in this other discipline? Or what is the related theories in your discipline? You're having to kind of upskill yourself quickly, right? But I find, because of that subject searching, or it's like and there can be styles, you can go either way. I personally like to kind of go into the other disciplines database and start and search there too. I definitely encourage you, and I'll encourage everybody, if you're doing a late review project, is make an appointment with one of us, with the research librarian, because we can help a lot, especially if you're feeling stuck, and just kind of sit with you and kind of go through for your project how that might play out. So the other things is, like, it's really about getting a handle on the language too, because as I said, they may be calling it something else that you're not used to that concept. That's what ended up happening to me for my project. I'm over here, I'm like, I'm searching across all this stuff. I'm searching across. And finally I realized it's called this in this field. That's the thing. And then I could take that term and apply it and then it blew everything open and I could find everything that was like that. Because at first I was like, how is it that nobody's talking about this? I'm not finding anything. I can't believe nobody's talking about this. Well, they were just calling it something different than what I was calling it. I don't know. Does that help?
Yes, that's super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. But if ever you're finding yourself like, I'm just really getting stuck, like just like reach out to your subject librarian. That's, we love thorny research problems. Okay. So step 4, you've done all this exploration and now you want to set a review question. And I have this upside down triangle here to kind of represent the overall direction your research might go. And I will say this is assuming you're doing an original study. You have your topic of interest. Your topic of interest is probably pretty broad. The reality of the thing is a lot of times when we're going to do an original research, the question that you end up asking is extremely focused, right? And so, but where you're starting is we're all very interested in all of these things. So here's my project. I started out with critical reading and research in university settings. Critical reading in higher education. And that's pretty big. And that's like many books, probably not more than one book. Your review question is the question that where you're going to focus and set the direction that your study is going to go. So for me, my review question was, how do reading abilities intersect with information search? This is the question that's going to inform the articles that you're going to pull for your literature review. It is different than your research question. You may not know your research question yet. You might have a kind of idea about what that is, but you might not know that. Your research question is the thing that you're doing study on. You cannot find the answer to your research question in the research because it's original, right? It should be a question that nobody's asked before. And so like this kind of thinking about, I'm not gonna find, hopefully, like am I gonna find the answer to my actual research question because it doesn't exist yet. That's the whole point. And so you're not necessarily going to get to that. So my ultimate research question is here. I did not know what that research question was when I first got started. And so we have directions, hunches, things, the way we want to go with it. But where you end up may be very different than where you started. That's the beauty of the research and the anxiety of it all at the same time. Okay, so once you get to a point of, I've explored, I know what's out there, I've scoped down, I've now found a focused research question. Now you're going to search for sources within your narrowed scope. So I said at the beginning, like, why am I exploring? Why am I not just saving citations right away? Because you don't know inevitably like the kind of, you didn't have a review question yet. You didn't know exactly the direction you were going. Now I know, and now you can start saving citations. Now you can start tracking sources, taking notes, reading sources. So this is your searches will look very different at this stage. And then you'll finally get to a point where you're writing your literature review. So how do I search within a narrowed scope? Oh, my pictures are looking a little blurry here. So first of all, at this point, you may have a handle on some very relevant research for your literature review. After you're exploring, you found some things, you would get a few things. This is when citation tracing becomes huge. So, and I have to say the importance of citation tracing, I personally, as a librarian, kind of undervalued for a while because I love taking a tool and making it work for me. But really, when you're citation tracing, you're using the power of the scholarly network to help point you to the things that are important. So citation tracing, and we're used to, you have an article, and we're probably all used to going backward, like looking at the sources that are cited in that article and tracing them back and finding that. Well, when you're doing literature review, a lot of the times, most of the time, you're trying to move forward in time. You're trying to find things that are more recent, right? Not things that are even older. And so that's when going forward using Google Scholar or Web of Science becomes really helpful. So I'll take a couple and just show you really quickly how to do this. Let me see. I want academic journals. I'm just going to pick a title here. I don't want anything too recent because that won't have given it time to be cited yet. Let's see. Wow, everything is so recent. Oh, here. All right, let's take this one. I'm just going to copy the title. I'm going to go into Google Scholar. So I suggest every time you find an article that is really on point, like just really matches the thing that you want to trace through. This is the line of research that I want to see everything and how it's all connected. That's when I would do citation tracing. So in Google Scholar, you can see this has been cited by 75 people at this stage. And so when I click that, now I'm getting the list of everything. I can even, so 75 is quite a few. I can click this and I can search within the citing articles. You can see I was just working with some political science research here. So maybe I'm looking at the concept of motivation within that. And so I can use that as a term and dump it in. So the thing about Google Scholar is, and I love using Google Scholar as an additional tool to my research. It searches things in a really different way. Just be aware that not everything in Google Scholar is scholarly. It just looks scholarly to a computer. So I find that to be really helpful. The other way you can is through Web of Science. So Web of Science is a database of citations. It is more useful for the sciences, very useful for the sciences, mostly useful for the social sciences, and it's not useful for the humanities. What it pulls from is a narrower thing. It pulls from like what it considers top rated journals. So you will get fewer results. Oops, didn't mean to do that. You will get fewer results in here because it's only like the very top, like it's the authoritative journals that it's considering. So here is the citation, and I can see this is, if I wanted to pull a list of all the references in that article, I can do that here, or I can pull 31 citations. So as I showed in Google Scholar, there were 75. This is only 31. Once you're in here, when you're in a database like this, like we can get, if you want this one, you would click this check other SMU options button so that you can get to the interlibrary loan system and request it through that. Or it might find it in one of our other databases. So citation tracing, hugely important at this stage. Obviously, continue to search in disciplinary databases. You go back out, look in library search. So there are some publications that maybe aren't picked up in your discipline's database. You're going to see a lot of the same things that you've already seen, but at this stage, you will have more focused search terms. You will know more about exactly what you're looking for. And so you'll be able to quickly sift through and see, versus that beginning stage when you're just exploring and not sure and you just end up getting overwhelmed. I showed here, so here's a search that I did in library search, like our big main search tool. You can even go in and say peer-reviewed journals, if peer-reviewed is important. And in this refine my results, include articles available through interlibrary loan. That is a way of you kind of pulling out and seeing and making sure, is there anything not through our library that I need to see? So interlibrary loan is our system of borrowing things from other libraries on your behalf. It's free for you. And it becomes a much more important service when you're conducting a literature review, because you need all of the things, not just the things that our library happens to have access to. So definitely, if you haven't been using interlibrary loan, you will probably need to in the course of conducting a literature review. Core publications. At this point, what are the major journals? If I'm publishing something in the field of advertising, I better make sure that I got everything out of the Journal of Advertising, because that is their big top journal. And I want to make sure that if there's things in there on the specific subject, I don't want to miss them. So that's a good thing to go back and check and make sure, what are the core journals, what are the core publications? Let me make sure that I've pulled citations out of those. Chances are you already did. At this point, you're going to start seeing the same things over and over again. And when you start seeing everything over and over and over again, then you know, I think I've got it. I think I'm ready to be done researching. Dissertations and theses. If you are doing a dissertation, it's important to go in. This is a ProQuest database, to go in and search for other people who have published a dissertation on that topic, because what you do needs to be completely original. Okay, pro tools at this point. If you do not have citation management yet, I highly, highly suggest you get it. So citation management is a system that it allows you to send any citations that you're finding in databases into your own account, saves them there. You can attach a PDF, and then when you go to write your paper, it produces the citations for you. Of course, you have to make sure they're done correctly and edit them, etc., because this is a computer producing it. But it is a massive time saver. I personally would not ever do a paper without it. So if you have not gotten that yet, here's a couple of links. These are the two that we support in the libraries. There are other kinds of citation management programs out there. And that might be a thing you follow up with about. The other one that I'll recommend, if you like searching for scholarship online, like you might go in and get yourself LibKey. LibKey Nomad is a browser extension that allows you to connect directly to library resources through your browser. So if you're out searching in Google Scholar, etc., you will see a pop-up in the lower left-hand corner, find a SMU. Anytime there's things that are available, then it'll just directly connect you straight into our library, instead of you having to copy the title and then go dump it over into our system to see if we have it. So I do recommend that if you like to search that way. So any questions on any of that? That was a lot. This workshop, we cover a lot of stuff very quickly. Okay, I'm going to talk for a minute about taking notes. And I have found, when I talk about these kind of things for taking notes, a lot of times students say this is like the most important thing they learned in the entire workshop. So I think a lot of us are used to taking notes for individual articles. And there's lots of effective ways of you can do that. You annotate it and connect it with other things and et cetera. So I think we know a lot about that. When you're doing a literature review, you are going to have to manage lots and lots of citations that can feel pretty overwhelming. And so what I'm showing you here is another layer of note taking. And honestly, personally, it's now become like my primary layer of note taking for these kind of things. Basically, it's a spreadsheet, and you set up the spreadsheet in a way that makes sense for what you're having to do. And so I have a couple of different kind of examples here. For this one, I've got what is the summary point? What are the supporting points? What are the connections, methodology of this study, etc. The beauty of putting it in a spreadsheet is that then you can see across your sources at once. And depending on how you set it up, you see I've got this section over here for themes. I can also create a way of organizing them so that I can filter the spreadsheet. So for example, if I have different parts of my literature review and I have different sections, in this section I'm talking about this, in this section I'm talking about that, you can add that into that themes column and sort your spreadsheet when you go to write your literature review. I also started including this. Am I going to use it? Because I realized I was dumping all kinds of things into my spreadsheet that I didn't end up using at the end of the day. So then when I go through and make decisions, am I going to use this? I don't want to delete this other stuff because there might be a chance I go back. I just put an X in there and then I can filter for the ones that I've put an X in that column. You can see this one down here, the methodology and the population, et cetera, became really important for this particular study. And so I included it on the spreadsheet, and that allowed me to really go through and manage all of these citations, all these different sources that I was coming across, made it feel much easier. So I highly recommend this. On that research guide, I have a couple of I have a template on there for matrix notes for lit reviews, if you would like to use that as a way to kind of get started with a matrix. Okay, here's my other layer of taking notes at this point, and this is a whiteboard from my actual research project. And Allison, this may be helpful for you too, given that your project is interdisciplinary, though I would see it helpful for many projects. When you're at this point and you're moving from, I have a literature review, what is my research question? Where am I positioning myself within all of this research? What you're going to notice is it's going to be overwhelming. All of the different things that are coming into this, all the different aspects of the research, even within your narrowed focus. So I highly recommend having some way of diagramming this. And so what you're seeing here is a whiteboard that represents many studies, all the studies in my lit review and how they're related to each other. And it's how you write this out is all going to depend on the topic, right? So this is the kind of process. So I'm talking about what strategies are people using? What are the preconditions? What are the different contexts? What are the different interventions that people have done? So this is representing the research that's in our literature review. And then we're seeing this is what's out there. And then what is not there? Where do we fit in with this kind of broader thing? And just putting it into a visual representation, I cannot recommend it enough. It's so helpful to kind of help conceptualize what's happening. Okay, so step 6, then you're actually going to write it. I will say everything with writing a literature review really depends on the discipline and the publication and the expectations of the assignment, et cetera, et cetera. So certainly this is just intended to be just kind of broadly helpful. So when you go to write a literature review, if you're doing an original study, it's not like I did my literature review, now I'm done, and now I move on to the study. It is an ongoing organic act. There are things that you might add to it even later. I didn't know that at first, and that's a thing I've had to learn. So I felt like it was a really helpful thing to know. Consider the audience when you're selecting what's to be covered, and we kind of talked about that before. What is this? What do I need to dig in more? What do I need to kind of go back and present some of the seminal research, because this is not a topic that this particular audience might know a lot about, etc. Create an outline for your review. I mean, I found that personally be really helpful, is to just create the outline and then the topics, and then I match the segment, the different sections to my matrix when I go to filter for that. Um, I have found, and it's relates to the research part and the writing part. When you're doing a literature review, it's hard to know, where do I draw the lines? When am I done? How much do I include? And I have found the most helpful thing to me in thinking about that is think about the fact, and yet again, big asterisk about the expectations of the discipline, but you're really showing the current state of the research and the important influences. You are not writing a review article, unless you are writing a review article, but you're not giving the entire history of the research. So you're going to be judicious. At first, you're going to like be kind of bathing in all of this stuff. At a certain point, you'll have to make some choices and realize that at the end of the day, you're not giving the entire history of all the things that were done in this area of research. It's really just to show kind of the context, the important influences, and the current research and how what you're doing is positioned within that. We're seeking balance. There's some suggestions out there about how they can be organized. It really depends on what makes sense for you and your topic. And then make sure with the lit review is you are synthesizing, you are summarizing, you're not, I asterisk for the discipline, but by and large, you're probably not direct quoting, you're more synthesizing and summarizing these things that are out there. So that was a lot of content that we went through. Do you all have questions, or is there anything you would like me to demonstrate of what we went through today?
I have a question
Yeah.
about, so you said we have a review question, and then that review question will later lead us to like our research question.
Mm-hmm.
And so I recently had to do a literature review, and it felt really hard to narrow on like a specific review question. Do you have any advice on um like after the exploratory phase, how to compose a question that will like put some parameters around the scope of our research?
Yeah, that is such a good question, and it's a hard it's a hard one to answer. Because there's this difference between all the things I'm interested in and how am I going to narrow it? Some of it's going to depend on your interests, right? What do I care about? Where do I actually want to be in this space? Because that's hugely important, right? You don't want to, just because something is out there that needs to be researched doesn't mean that you want to do it. So what are you interested in? Where are you finding that? It's kind of this balance of, where are you finding that there's a gap there, and I'm also interested in that gap, you know? I mean, for me, like in doing mine, I was like, this is really, I had bigger goals. I had bigger practical goals of what I wanted to see this research being used for. And so that also helped me to think about, given my bigger goals, what research is going to help support that in all of these things that I'm looking at? What direction is going to help move us there? What would the people who I'm trying to talk to and where I'm trying to get at? And that's a very, because I'm a librarian, everything we do is very practical and action focused. So that may not apply. Well, it applies for education folks, but I don't know. Is that helpful? that's that's a
No,
hard,
yeah,
it's a hard question.
yeah, for sure. No, that is helpful. And I think probably it'll be clearer once I like dive into the doing the exploratory stage of things. I had one more question as well
Sure.
about the note taking. That
Mm-hmm.
note taking method, is it just for um, the literature review process, or is it for like the general writing process as well?
It's both, because
Okay.
which one are you talking about? This one?
Yeah, the the matrix and note taking, I've had a very difficult time trying to figure out how to like keep all my notes in a way that I can like actually reference them and use them and compare
Right.
them together.
Right. I see it as there being levels of note taking. And so you have the first level, which is taking notes on the individual article. So on this specific is in economic empowerment, a protective factor. What are my notes on that specific article? And that's, I think, a lot of times what people focus on. And you probably already have ways of doing that. I will say, just like, and people have kind of personal. I mean, I like to, if it's a really important article for me personally, I print it out and I write with my hands on it. Like, because me handwriting helps me to think better. Some people like to annotate onto the PDF itself and do that. But let's consider the next level up of this bigger, broader view of all your sources and the notes about all your sources at once. And that's what the matrix is good for, where I can actually pull up all 30, 40, whatever citations that are going to eventually make it into my literature review, or the 50 citations I'm going to winnow down, And so depending on the discipline, I would say honestly, for social sciences, this could potentially be it. For sciences, this is it, because really, what is the research question, the methodology, the results, like my notes from that's really all I need to know. I mean, there's things I've gone back into individual articles and reference them, like they're using a methodology similar to something that I'm interested in, or I want to go back in and read this discussion again because I remember it has a lot of things that there may be reasons why I want to dive really back into the individual article, but honestly, this matrix level becomes more important because I'm seeing across them. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah. And then while you're writing, because you're writing a literature review, you're referencing all this stuff, then you can kind of go back to this sift, filter the spreadsheet, etc. That's like when you outline and you say section 1, section 2, section 3, you could literally go through there and have a column that says sections 1, 2, 3, 4, and then filter the spreadsheet and say, I only want to see section 1 because I'm writing section 1. Here are all my citations for section 1. Okay. Marissa says, please share the templates. Yes. Let's see. I think I put that on here. I'm double checking. So this is my guide on literature reviews. Do I have that on here? I will add it. It's not on there. I'm going to add it to this guide. It is on. I will add it to the lit review guide. I thought I had it on there, but we also have another guide on how to take notes. And so that matrix is on there. Yeah. I tell you what, when I learned about the matrix notes, that was pretty life-changing. It makes, put your notes in a spreadsheet, mic drop. There's your workshop. Do you all have any other questions? All right. Well, if not, thank you all so much for attending. I hope that you found this to be useful. I do encourage you to reach out to your subject librarian. You can make an appointment with us. If you are doing a big project like a literature review, we can kind of be really helpful, even if you just need some research therapy. We are there to help you make this process easier for you. So thanks so much and have a good afternoon, everybody.